The training hall carried a calm, focused energy. Soft light filtered through high windows, landing across polished mats where students moved with quiet discipline. No music, no crowd noise, just breathing, balance, and control. It was the kind of place where ego was left at the door and respect guided every step. That morning, a visitor entered the hall. He walked with confidence, not arrogance, but certainty earned through years of training. His posture was upright, his movements precise. The instructors welcomed him professionally and introduced him to the class as a visiting Taekwondo champion, someone known for speed, agility, and competitive success. The students listened with interest. Today is an open training session, one instructor explained calmly. Technique, awareness, and respect come first. The visitor nodded and scanned the room. Then his eyes settled on a man standing quietly near the edge of the mat, dressed simply. No display of rank, no attention drawn to himself. The man was Keanu Reeves, portrayed in this clearly fictional story not as a celebrity, but as a regular practitioner. He was tying his belt carefully, focused on the task, unaware of the attention for a moment. The visiting champion stepped forward politely. "I was told this academy encourages open exchange," he said. "Would anyone be interested in a light technical session?" The room grew still. No challenge in his tone. No mockery, just curiosity and confidence. Keanu looked up. He met the man's eyes and offered a small, respectful nod. "If the instructors approve," he said calmly, "I'd be happy to participate." There was no tension in his voice, no bravado, no attempt to impress. What no one realized in that quiet moment was this: the situation unfolding had nothing to do with titles, records, or reputation. It was about mindset. The visiting champion assumed he was facing another disciplined student, capable, perhaps, but ordinary. Keanu, on the other hand, approached the moment without assumptions at all. Around them, students sensed something subtle shifting, not excitement, not rivalry, but focus. The instructor observed carefully. "Remember," he reminded everyone, "today isn't about winning. It's about learning." Both men stepped toward the mat. No crowd gathered closer. No whisper started, just two practitioners preparing to move, and a lesson about humility, discipline, and quiet confidence waiting to reveal itself. The academy itself was designed around one principle: balance. Natural light filled the open space, reflecting off clean wooden walls lined with framed calligraphy. Words like discipline, respect, and control. There were no trophies on display, no posters of champions, no reminders of past victories. This was intentional. The instructors believed that once achievements became decoration, learning stopped. Students of different ages and backgrounds trained side by side. Some were beginners, carefully copying basic stances. Others were advanced practitioners, moving with smooth confidence earned over years of repetition. Everyone followed the same rules. Everyone bowed when entering the mat. Titles stayed outside. This was not a competition gym. It was a fictional learning environment, created for growth rather than dominance. The visiting Taekwondo champion took a moment to absorb the atmosphere. It was quieter than he expected. No one was watching him with awe. No one whispered his name. That felt unfamiliar, but also refreshing. One of the senior instructors approached him. "Thank you for joining us today," she said warmly. "Our goal is exchange, not comparison." The champion nodded. "That's exactly why I came." Across the mat, Keanu Reeves, portrayed in this story in a fictional role, continued warming up. His movements were economical and controlled. No wasted energy. No dramatic stretches. Just steady preparation. He didn't appear nervous. He didn't appear eager either. He was present. When the instructor announced that the session would include optional technical exchanges, Keanu didn't immediately step forward. He waited. He listened. He respected the structure of the room. Only after the visitor repeated his interest in a light exchange did the instructor look toward Keanu. "Would you be comfortable participating?" she asked. Keanu nodded once. "Yes," he replied, "as long as we keep it technical and respectful." The rules were clearly outlined for everyone to hear. No competitive scoring. No power strikes. Focus on footwork, timing, and awareness. Stop immediately if instructed. This was not about testing strength. It was about observing control. The Taekwondo champion appreciated the clarity. He adjusted his stance, already calculating distance and speed. Years of competition had trained his instincts to analyze opponents quickly: posture, balance, reaction time. From his perspective, Keanu appeared calm, perhaps even understated. No visible tension in his shoulders. No aggressive posture. No attempt to size him up. The champion assumed this would be a clean, straightforward exchange, useful, but uneventful. What he didn't consider was this: some practitioners train to impress, while others train to understand. Keanu stepped onto the mat only after being invited again. He bowed respectfully to the instructors, then to his partner. His expression remained neutral, not detached, but grounded. "Thank you," he said simply. Around them, students naturally gave space, not because they expected something dramatic, but because the energy had narrowed into focus. Conversations quieted. Movement slowed. The instructor raised her hand. "Begin when ready," she said. In that moment, nothing extraordinary had happened yet. No techniques were exchanged. No skill was revealed, but the foundation was set. A confident champion, trained for competition. A quiet practitioner, trained for consistency. Two paths of mastery about to cross. In a space where respect mattered more than reputation. The instructor didn't signal immediately. She allowed a moment of stillness, a pause that experienced practitioners understood well. It wasn't hesitation. It was intention. In that silence, both participants adjusted their breathing and grounded themselves in the space. Then she nodded. "Begin," she said calmly. The Taekwondo champion moved first, stepping lightly into range. His footwork was crisp and measured, the result of years spent refining speed and precision. He wasn't aggressive. He wasn't reckless. His movements followed the rules exactly as stated: controlled, technical, observant. Keanu responded by shifting his stance slightly. No sudden motion. No rush. He didn't retreat, but he didn't press forward either. Instead, he adjusted distance with small steps, staying balanced, eyes level, shoulders relaxed. To an untrained observer, it might have looked passive. To anyone experienced, it looked deliberate. The champion tested range, with a light feint. Keanu adjusted. The champion changed angle. Keanu mirrored the movement, maintaining alignment without copying it directly. His focus wasn't on the feint itself, but on timing, when it began, how long it lasted, how it resolved. Around them, the room remained silent. Students watched not for spectacle, but for understanding. The instructors observed posture, breath control, and awareness, the details that mattered more than speed. The Taekwondo champion increased his rhythm slightly, not to overwhelm, but to gather information. He moved in and out, switching lead legs, testing reactions. Each time, Keanu responded with minimal motion. No wasted steps, no exaggerated counters. He maintained center balance, adjusting only enough to stay aligned and safe. His eyes tracked movement calmly, never fixed on a single limb. The champion noticed something unusual. There was no opening, not because Keanu was blocking everything, but because he wasn't offering anything. The exchange continued. The champion attempted a controlled entry, stopping short as instructed. Keanu shifted his weight, redirecting the space between them rather than challenging it. The moment passed without contact. The instructor nodded quietly. This was exactly what the exercise was meant to show. The Taekwondo champion felt it then, not frustration, but curiosity. He wasn't being resisted. He was being read. So he slowed. He focused less on technique and more on rhythm. Keanu responded in kind. For several seconds, neither man moved forward. They circled, measuring distance, matching pace. It wasn't a standoff. It was a conversation, one spoken through balance and awareness rather than words. The champion tried another approach, stepping in with a different timing pattern. Keanu adjusted again, always half a step ahead of the moment, not reacting late, not anticipating early, just present. Finally, the instructor raised her hand. "That's enough," she said. Both men stopped immediately. No final move. No conclusion gesture. They stepped back and bowed respectfully. The Taekwondo champion exhaled slowly. "I see," he said quietly, more to himself than to anyone else. He hadn't been challenged in the way he expected, but he had been shown something far more valuable. In that controlled exchange, without strikes or displays. The difference between practicing to perform and practicing to understand had become clear, and everyone watching felt it. This wasn't about proving who was better. It was about recognizing depth. After the instructor's signal to pause, the room did not immediately return to motion. There was a lingering stillness, not awkward, not tense, but thoughtful, the kind of silence that follows understanding rather than surprise. Students remained where they were. Instructors exchanged brief glances, and both practitioners stayed composed, breathing steady. The instructor spoke calmly. "We'll continue," she said. "Same rules. Same focus. Observe, don't perform." Both men acknowledged her words with a nod. They stepped forward again. This time, the Taekwondo champion didn't rush to initiate movement. The earlier exchange had shifted something in his approach. He stood lighter on his feet, shoulders relaxed, eyes attentive rather than probing. He wasn't trying to test limits anymore. He was trying to feel the space. Keanu mirrored the calm. His posture remained unchanged, upright but loose, grounded without stiffness. His stance suggested readiness, but not intention. He wasn't preparing to act. He was preparing to respond only if needed. They began moving again. Slowly at first, the champion adjusted his footwork, stepping at diagonals rather than straight lines. He changed rhythm intentionally, a half-step pause, then a smooth glide forward. His movements were clean, disciplined, and precise, shaped by years of competition training. Keanu adjusted just enough to remain centered, not backing away, not advancing. He stayed balanced between motion and stillness, maintaining an even distance that never invited pressure and never created resistance. His hands remained relaxed, not raised defensively, not lowered carelessly. Observers began to notice something subtle. Keanu wasn't reacting to movements. He was reacting to intent. When the champion shifted weight forward with curiosity, Keanu softened his stance. When the champion's posture hinted at commitment, Keanu adjusted angle, never meeting force directly. It looked effortless, not because it was easy, but because it was economical. The Taekwondo champion attempted a controlled directional entry, stopping well within the agreed limits. Keanu stepped offline smoothly, turning his body just enough to neutralize the space, without touching his partner. The movement ended quietly. No clash, no block, no interruption. The instructor observed closely. "This," she said softly to the students nearby, "is awareness without aggression." The exchange continued. The champion increased pace slightly, not speed, but flow. His steps connected more fluidly now, transitioning from one angle to the next. His breathing stayed calm. His technique remained sharp. Keanu matched the pace without matching the movement. Where the champion flowed outward, Keanu stayed inward. Where the champion expanded motion, Keanu compressed it. He wasn't countering techniques. He was managing distance, timing, and alignment. The students began to understand. This wasn't about who could move faster. It was about who needed to move less. At one point, the champion paused mid-step, uncertain whether to continue. That hesitation wasn't weakness. It was respect. He had sensed that pushing further would add nothing. Keanu remained still. Not frozen. Not rigid. Just ready. After several seconds, the instructor raised her hand again. "Enough," she said. Both men stopped immediately. They bowed, first to each other, then to the instructors. The Taekwondo champion spoke first. "I've trained for years to control motion," he said thoughtfully. "But I see now, control can also mean knowing when motion isn't necessary." Keanu smiled lightly, offering no correction, no commentary on skill. "Training teaches us many things," he replied. "Listening teaches us the rest." There was no applause. No reaction meant for show. The students returned to their drills quietly, carrying with them something more lasting than excitement. They had witnessed a rare exchange, one where skill wasn't displayed, but contained. The instructor watched the room settle back into rhythm and nodded to herself. In a world that often rewards visibility and force, the lesson had been clear. True mastery doesn't announce itself. It reveals itself only to those paying attention. And in that moment, everyone was. The session paused, but the lesson continued. As students returned to their individual drills, the atmosphere in the academy felt subtly different, calmer, quieter, more attentive. No one rushed to speak. No one tried to summarize what they had seen. The exchange had left an impression that didn't require explanation. The Taekwondo champion stepped to the side of the mat and loosened his gloves slowly. His expression wasn't troubled, but thoughtful. He hadn't been outmatched. He hadn't been corrected. And yet, something fundamental in his understanding had shifted. He approached the instructor. "May I ask a question?" he said respectfully. She nodded. "Of course. In competition," he continued, choosing his words carefully, "we're trained to take initiative, to assert presence. Today felt different." The instructor smiled faintly. "Competition rewards decisiveness," she said. "Training rewards awareness. They are related, but they are not the same." The champion considered this. Across the room, Keanu sat quietly near the wall, hydrating and observing the students without comment. He didn't look toward the champion. He didn't look toward the instructors. He simply watched movement, foot placement, posture, balance, the small details that revealed where attention lived. The champion noticed that. He walked over. "Thank you," he said simply. Keanu looked up, surprised for a brief moment, then nodded. "For what?" he asked. "For showing me something without trying to," the champion replied. "That's rare." Keanu smiled lightly. "I didn't show anything," he said. "I just stayed present." They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the sound of training continuing around them. Mats shifted. Feet moved. Breath flowed. The champion spoke again. "I came here thinking I'd exchange techniques," he said, "but it felt more like exchanging perspectives." Keanu considered that. "Technique answers how," he replied. "Perspective answers why." The champion nodded slowly. In his career, recognition had come through visibility, medals, matches, announcements. Progress had always been measured in results. But today's exchange hadn't produced a result. It had produced clarity. He realized something important. Strength wasn't diminished by restraint. Confidence wasn't weakened by silence. And mastery didn't require demonstration. The instructor approached them both. "You handled that exchange well," she said. "Both of you." The champion bowed respectfully. "I learned more in those few minutes than I expected," he admitted. "That's because you were listening," she replied. She turned to Keanu. "You remind our students that control isn't something you apply to others," she said. "It's something you apply to yourself." Keanu inclined his head slightly, accepting the words without ownership. The instructor addressed the class next, her voice calm but clear. "What you witnessed today wasn't a challenge," she said. "It was a conversation, one that didn't need volume or victory." Students paused their drills, listening. "When skill is loud, it seeks validation," she continued. "When skill is quiet, it creates trust." The Taekwondo champion felt no embarrassment, no loss, only respect for the space, for the people, and for a kind of mastery he had rarely encountered. As the session prepared to move on, he realized the most important truth of the day. You don't need to know who someone is to learn from how they move. And sometimes, the greatest realization doesn't come from being challenged, but from being understood. The academy returned fully to its rhythm, but for those who had paid attention, something lasting had already settled into place. The training session began to wind down, not with a signal or announcement, but naturally, as focused work often does. Movement softened, drills slowed, conversations remained minimal, purposeful. The energy in the academy felt settled, as though everything had aligned back into place. The instructor gathered the students near the center of the mat. "Before we finish," she said calmly, "I want to acknowledge what today represented." No names were mentioned, no achievements highlighted. "Martial arts," she continued, "are not about defeating others. They are about refining ourselves, our reactions, our assumptions, our presence." The Taekwondo champion stood among the students now, no longer positioned as a visitor or guest, but simply as another practitioner. He listened with the same attention as everyone else. Keanu remained quietly at the edge of the group. The instructor gestured gently toward both men. "What you saw today," she said, "was respect meeting respect. Nothing more, nothing less." The champion nodded. He stepped forward slightly and addressed the group. "I arrived here confident in my abilities," he said honestly. "I leave appreciating something deeper, restraint, awareness, and humility. There was no dramatic pause, no emphasis for effect, just sincerity. Keanu spoke next, briefly. Training teaches us skill, he said, but life tests our character. That was all. No applause followed, not because the words lacked meaning, but because they didn't ask for reaction. The students absorbed them quietly, as lessons meant to be carried rather than celebrated. As people began to gather their belongings, the Taekwondo champion approached Keanu once more. I hope we meet again, he said. Not to spar, but to train. Keanu smiled. I'd like that, he replied. Learning never ends. They bowed respectfully, not as opponents, not as teacher and student, as equals. The instructor watched the exchange with quiet approval. This was the outcome she valued most, not improved technique, but improved understanding. Later, as the academy doors opened and daylight filtered in, students stepped out with thoughtful expressions. Conversations were softer than usual. There was no replaying of moments, no exaggeration of movement. The lesson had already settled. Strength is not proven through dominance. Confidence is not displayed through volume. Respect is not conditional. The Taekwondo champion paused at the entrance before leaving. He looked back at the empty mat, now still and quiet. For years, he had chased improvement by adding more speed, more power, more precision. Today had taught him something unexpected. Sometimes growth comes from removing ego, urgency, and the need to be seen. Keanu remained inside, helping roll the mats with other students. No one treated him differently. No one needed to. And that, perhaps, was the most powerful resolution of all. Because real mastery doesn't end a session with victory. It ends with balance. As the academy emptied and the echoes of training faded, what remained was not a memory of techniques or movement, but a feeling of clarity. There had been no decisive moment, no final exchange, no visible victory. And yet, everyone who had been present carried something meaningful with them. The students walked away understanding that strength does not need permission to exist. It doesn't require recognition. It doesn't demand comparison. True strength is consistent. It shows up the same way whether someone is watching or not. The instructors reflected on the session quietly. They had seen this lesson many times before, but it never lost its value. Whenever ego was replaced with awareness, growth followed naturally. In this clearly fictional story, the encounter between a confident champion and a calm practitioner was never about who knew more. It was about how knowledge was carried. One saw challenge, the other practiced presence. Neither was wrong, but together, they revealed a truth that extended beyond martial arts and into everyday life. We often mistake confidence for volume. We confuse mastery with display. We assume power must announce itself. But real discipline is quiet. Real confidence is steady. And real respect doesn't change based on who stands in front of us. The Taekwondo champion left the academy not diminished, but expanded, reminded that growth doesn't always come from resistance. Sometimes it comes from reflection. Keanu's fictional portrayal in this story served as a symbol, not of fame or status, but of something far more universal, the ability to remain grounded regardless of circumstance. That is a skill anyone can practice. In workplaces, in conversations, in moments of disagreement, in situations where ego wants to lead. When we choose calm over reaction, when we listen instead of rushing to respond, when we stay respectful even when we feel certain, we don't lose strength. We refine it. And that is the lesson this story leaves behind. Not a warning, not a challenge, but an invitation to move through life with awareness, to treat every interaction as a training ground, to remember that how we act matters more than who we are, because the world doesn't need louder voices. It needs steadier ones.